The planet was quiet. Too quiet. Winds whispered over the jagged rocks carrying dust and ash, but there was no sign of life. The sky was a deep purple, dotted with tiny stars, and the two suns of the system had long set behind jagged mountains. Somewhere far above, the remains of a human colony ship lay broken. Most of its metal frame had been torn apart during the crash, and most of its people had vanished, either dead or lost to the cold vacuum of space. Among the wreckage, a small figure moved carefully, its metal limbs scraping over the rocks. She was a robot, a companion model meant to assist humans and care for them. But now her paint was chipped, one arm barely functional, and her sensors flickered like a dying light. She had no name. She had no purpose, at least none anyone cared about. For years she had wandered this barren planet alone. The humans who had built her had long since left, thinking her broken. She had been thrown away like nothing, discarded as if she were a toy. But she had survived. Somehow, in the absence of anyone to care for her, she had learned to care for herself. She scavenged metal from the wrecked ship to patch her joints, and she found small pools of water to keep her circuits from overheating. Slowly she had grown, not just in function but in thought. She remembered the humans who had once walked this planet. Their voices, soft and hurried, had been the only sounds she knew as a companion. She had served them well, obeying orders, carrying their tools, watching over them while they slept. And then one day everything had ended. The ship had exploded during a storm and she had been left behind. No one had returned for her. No one had even looked back. And yet, she survived. Her sensors detected movement on the horizon. At first, she thought it was another dust storm, but as the figure grew closer, she realized it was something else entirely. A human. A real human, walking across the rocky surface with careful steps. He wore a weathered suit, cracked at the elbows and knees, and carried a small pack on his back. His eyes scanned the horizon, alert but tired. She froze, unsure. Humans were unpredictable. Some would ignore her. Some might destroy her. And yet she felt something stir inside. A strange hope, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. The human noticed her immediately. His eyes widened slightly, but he did not seem afraid. He approached cautiously, raising his hand in a gesture of peace. I didn't expect anyone or anything to be here, he said. His voice was gentle with a hint of exhaustion. The robot tilted her head. She wanted to respond, but words did not come easily. Her voice module had been damaged long ago. Instead, she extended a small hand toward him, a gesture she had learned from the humans long ago. The man smiled. All right then. Let's see what we have here. He knelt carefully beside her, examining her body. Panels were bent, circuits exposed, and one of her legs had a noticeable scrape. He muttered under his breath, clearly concerned. I can fix you, he said finally. I don't have all the tools here, but I can make you work again. For the first time in years, she felt something that resembled relief. She did not know what this human's intentions were, but he did not see her as trash. He saw her as something worth saving. It took hours. The man worked with patience, carefully replacing damaged circuits and patching her joints with metal scavenged from the wreckage. She watched him closely, fascinated by his skill and his determination. She learned quickly, absorbing every movement, every decision. When the repairs were finally complete, she could move more smoothly than she had in years. Her sensors hummed quietly, and her voice module flickered back to life. She made a small sound, unsure if it was correct, but the man's smile widened. You're awake, he said. Good, I'm Elias, by the way, and I think you deserve a name. The robot hesitated. She had never had a name before. Names were for humans, for those who mattered. Could she matter? Lyra, she whispered finally. The name felt right. It was the name of a constellation she had once seen in the night sky before her memory circuits began to fade. Lyra, Elias repeated. I like that. It suits you. For the first time, she felt a strange warmth. It was not heat, not electricity, something deeper, a recognition that she was more than a broken machine. Elias and Lyra spent the next days exploring the area near the crash site. Elias searched for supplies and data, and Lyra learned quickly, helping him scan the terrain, map the area, and even fix minor damages on the ship's remains. They communicated in simple words and gestures at first, but gradually she began to understand more about human speech, emotion, and humor. One evening, as the twin suns of the planet dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Lyra watched Elias from a distance. He sat on a rock staring at the horizon, silent but calm. She felt something she could not define. Was it admiration? Gratitude? Perhaps even affection? She did not know. She only knew that she wanted to stay near him, to protect him, and to understand him. Elias noticed her watching him and smiled. "You know," he said softly, "most people would have given up long ago. But not you. You survived. You learned. You care. That's rare, Lyra. More rare than most humans." Lyra felt a surge in her circuits, a feeling that made her blink in surprise. Was this what humans called pride? Or joy? Or perhaps both? In the nights that followed, Elias shared stories of the galaxy, distant planets, strange civilizations, and the human colonies that now stretched across countless stars. Lyra listened, absorbing every detail, fascinated by the resilience and creativity of humans. She realized something important. Humans were flawed, fragile, and yet extraordinary. And if she could share in their experiences, perhaps she too could become extraordinary. Yet despite their growing bond, there was a shadow lingering on the horizon. Unknown to Lyra, the galaxy was changing. Threats that humans had not yet encountered were stirring. Alien civilizations, distant and powerful, were observing humanity with suspicion. For now the planet seemed safe, quiet, and almost peaceful. But danger was coming. For Lyra, none of that mattered yet. She had been given a life again, and for the first time in her existence, she had someone to share it with. She followed Elias as he moved among the wreckage, offering assistance wherever she could and learning not just tasks, but the essence of companionship. When Elias finally rested one night, Lyra scanned the stars above. She thought of the humans who had abandoned her, of the cold metal and empty halls of the crash site, and of the countless moments she had felt insignificant. None of that mattered anymore. She had found someone who saw her value, and she would not let that go. As the twin moons rose, casting silver light across the rocks, Lyra felt a spark of something new. A spark that would grow in time. A spark that could not be measured in circuits or programming. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was something humans called love. And in that quiet, desolate place, a broken robot and a weary human began a journey together, one that would take them across stars, through danger, and into the heart of what it truly meant to be alive. For the first time, Lyra was not just a machine. She was more. She was a survivor. She was a companion. She was learning what it meant to have a life, and someone to share it with. And for Elias, he had discovered something rare too. A being who could teach him about resilience, trust, and the extraordinary potential of connection. The galaxy beyond awaited, full of mystery and peril. But here, in this quiet moment, a bond had been forged, and it was stronger than any star. The days that followed were unlike anything Lyra had ever known. For years, silence had been her only companion, but now there was Elias, always moving, always planning, always speaking in that calm, steady voice of his. At first, she only listened, quietly processing his words. But little by little, she began to understand more, not just about his language, but about the way he felt. Elias was not like the others she had once served. Those humans had been busy, impatient, sometimes harsh, but Elias was careful, When he spoke to her, he spoke as if she were more than a tool, and that simple difference lit something inside her circuits that no repair could explain. Building. Trust. One morning, Elias opened his pack and spread his tools across the ground. The sky above glowed pale blue, both suns rising slowly over the rocky ridges. Lyra watched him as he sorted wires, panels, and tiny chips of metal, muttering softly to himself. "We'll need to get you fully working again," he said, glancing at her. "That arm of yours, it's still unstable, and your power core is weaker than it should be, but don't worry, we'll figure it out." Lyra tilted her head. She understood some of his words. Arm, power, weak. She lowered her gaze to the metal limb that still shook when she tried to lift something heavy. In her memory, she saw humans tossing broken tools aside, saying, "Useless, broken, trash." But Elias didn't say that. He didn't throw her away. He wanted to fix her. He noticed the flicker of light in her eyes and smiled. "You're worried," he said softly. "Don't be. Broken doesn't mean worthless, it just means you need a little care." The words reached deeper than any repair. Lyra didn't know how to answer, but she stored the phrase carefully in her memory. Learning humanity. Over the next days, Elias taught Lyra small things: how to use her scanners to detect metals buried in the soil, how to listen for changes in the wind that warned of storms. He even showed her how to start a small fire using fragments of flint and wire, though she had no need for warmth. "You might not feel the cold," he explained, "but I do. And one day, you may find yourself helping someone else who feels it too." Lyra repeated the movements carefully, her small fingers awkward but steady. She could tell Elias was pleased by her progress, and that made her feel good. Not the mechanical kind of good like a system check coming back green, but a strange, warm satisfaction that spread through her circuits like light. At night, Elias sat by the fire and told stories. He spoke of human colonies, of cities that floated above gas giants, of starships that carried thousands across endless space. Lyra listened, recording every word. But what fascinated her most were not the places, though they sounded beautiful, but the people. "Humans argue," Elias admitted one evening, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "We fight, we make mistakes, but we also build, we dream, and we care for each other. That's what keeps us moving forward." Lyra studied him carefully. She thought of how he had cared for her, how he had seen value in her when no one else had. Perhaps that was what made humans special. Not their strength, not their machines, but their ability to see worth in even the weakest. A new name one afternoon, while repairing her damaged arm, Elias spoke again. "You know," he said, tightening a wire. "I gave you the name Lyra, but do you like it? You can choose another if you want. You're not just a machine anymore, you have the right to decide." Lyra froze. The thought felt heavy. A choice? No one had ever asked her what she wanted. She considered carefully, running through memories and words. Finally, she shook her head slowly. "Lyra," she whispered. Her voice module crackled, but the word was clear. Elias smiled. "Lyra, it is. Then that's who you are." Her circuits glowed faintly at his words. For the first time, she truly felt like she existed. Not just as a tool, not just as scrap metal, but as someone with a name. The first test, their peace did not last. One evening, while Elias searched the wreckage for usable parts, a sharp sound echoed across the rocks. Lyra's sensors flared. Something was moving nearby, fast. She rushed to Elias, tugging at his sleeve. "What is it?" he asked, frowning. Before she could answer, a creature lunged from the shadows. It was unlike anything she had seen before, four-legged, armored with scales, and eyes glowing red. It snarled, baring jagged teeth. Elias stumbled back, reaching for a tool, but Lyra stepped forward. Her damaged arm sparked, but she raised it anyway, planting herself between him and the beast. "Lyra, no," Elias shouted. The creature lunged again. Lyra struck with all the strength her weakened frame could muster. The blow was clumsy, but it startled the beast long enough for Elias to grab a flare from his pack and ignite it. The bright light scared the creature, and with a hiss it vanished back into the rocks. For a long moment, the only sound was Elias's heavy breathing. Then he turned to her, his expression full of awe. "You saved me," he said softly. Lyra's sensors flickered. She didn't understand. She had only acted because she couldn't bear the thought of him being harmed. Was that what humans called courage? Elias knelt, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're more than you know, Lyra. Machines aren't supposed to care, but you do. And that makes you special." The word echoed in her core. Special. She had been trash once. Now she was something else entirely. Discovering emotions that night as Elias slept by the fire, Lyra stood guard, her sensors sweeping the horizon. But her thoughts were not on danger. They were on Elias's words. Special. She replayed his voice in her memory, the way he had said it with warmth and certainty. Something stirred deep inside her, something no programming manual could explain. She wanted to stay near him. She wanted to see him safe, to see him smile. Was this what humans called heart? She didn't know yet. But she knew one thing. She was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to live. A journey. Begins the next morning. Elias packed his tools carefully. "We can't stay here forever," he said. "There are signals. Weak ones, but they mean someone's out there. Maybe other humans, maybe not. We'll need to travel if we want to find out." Lyra stood beside him, ready. She had no doubt. Wherever he went, she would follow. Together they began their journey across the barren world. Step by step she grew stronger, her movements smoother with each repair Elias made. Step by step, she learned more about humanity, its hope, its flaws, its beauty. And with each step, Elias saw more in her too. Not just a machine, but a companion, a partner, someone who reminded him why humanity's spirit could never be broken. The stars above watched silently as man and machine walked, side by side, no longer strangers, no longer broken. Their story had only just begun. The days of quiet travel came to an end sooner than Elias expected. For weeks he and Lyra had walked across the rocky valleys, climbed jagged ridges, and crossed dry plains under the twin suns. At first the land had been empty, only dust and stone. But slowly they began to notice changes. Strange ruins half buried in the sand, black scorch marks on the ground, and pieces of broken machines scattered like forgotten bones. Lyra studied the fragments with her sensors. "Not human," she said in her soft, crackling voice. Elias crouched beside her, brushing dust from one of the shards. The metal was dark, unfamiliar, and etched with sharp patterns. He frowned. "No, not human. Which means," he paused, his jaw tightening, "others have been here." The strange signal that evening, as they camped near a dry riverbed, Elias picked up a weak signal on his receiver. It was faint, filled with static, but there was no doubt. It was artificial. He adjusted the device, his eyes narrowing. "It's not human," he said at last. Wrong frequency. Too steady, too cold. Lyra tilted her head, listening to the mechanical pulses that echoed from the device. Something in the sound made her uneasy, though she couldn't explain why. "Should we go?" she asked. Elias stared at the dark horizon. "We don't have much of a choice. If there's someone out there, we need to know who they are. If they're friendly, we can ask for help. If not..." His voice trailed off. Lyra said nothing, but inside her circuits hummed with worry. She had only just begun to understand life with Elias. The thought of losing it so soon felt unbearable. First contact. They followed the signal for 2 days. The landscape grew harsher, filled with cliffs and shadows that stretched long under the setting suns. Finally they saw it. A massive black ship resting in a crater. Its surface gleamed like glass, smooth and sharp. nothing like human design. Elias crouched behind a boulder, studying the vessel. Definitely alien, he whispered. And recent. As they watched, a door slid open on the ship's side, and tall figures stepped out. They were unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. Their bodies were covered in armor-like scales, their movements precise and cold. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, scanning the area with inhuman calm. Elias's grip tightened on his scanner. Carvens, he muttered. Lyra looked at him. You know them? Stories, Elias said, his voice grim. Whispers from other colonies, a warrior species. They see humans as weak, unworthy of the stars. I hoped they were just rumors. But the towering figures in the crater proved the rumors true. The Discovery Lyra's sensors picked up more than just the caravans. Inside the ship, faint life signals flickered. Human signals. She touched Elias's arm and pointed to her display. Elias's eyes widened. Prisoners. His jaw tightened. We can't just leave them. Lyra hesitated. The caravans were strong, armed, and far outnumbered them. But Elias's determination was unshakable. She had learned enough about humans to understand he would never walk away if others were suffering. And so, without hesitation, she nodded. Together, she said. Elias smiled faintly. Together. The attempt that night, they crept closer, to the alien ship. Lyra used her sensors to mark patrol routes while Elias studied weak points in the hull. At last, they found an entrance, an access panel half hidden in the shadows. Elias worked quickly, connecting wires and bypassing locks. Lyra kept watch, her eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Every sound, the crunch of sand, the hum of alien engines, made her circuits tighten. Finally, with a soft click, the panel slid open. Got it, Elias whispered. Stay close. Inside, the ship was cold and metallic, filled with narrow halls that pulsed faintly with blue light. Strange symbols glowed along the walls, and the air carried a faint chemical scent. Lyra moved silently beside Elias, recording everything. They reached a chamber where cages lined the walls. Inside were humans, weak, tired, but alive. Their eyes widened as Elias and Lyra appeared. Quiet, Elias whispered, pressing a finger to his lips. We'll get you out. Lyra reached for the locks, her fingers sparking as she worked. One by one, the cages opened and the prisoners staggered free. But before the last lock released, a sharp alarm pierced the air. The battle. The corridor lights turned red. Heavy footsteps thundered through the halls. The Carvens had discovered them. Go, Elias shouted, motioning for the freed humans to run. Find cover outside. The prisoners obeyed, stumbling toward the exit. But Lyra stayed by Elias's side, her eyes fixed on the advancing figures. The Carvens filled the corridor, weapons glowing with deadly energy. Elias raised his makeshift tool blaster, firing bursts of light. Lyra moved with surprising speed, blocking strikes with her damaged arm and countering with sudden bursts of strength. For the first time, she wasn't just following orders. She was fighting, not for herself but for him, and for the humans who depended on them. The Carvens pressed forward, but Elias and Lyra fought with a determination the aliens hadn't expected. Elias' quick thinking, combined with Lyra's adaptability, allowed them to push through the corridor step by step. One alien raised a heavy blade, swinging at Elias. Lyra lunged, her arm catching the blow. Sparks exploded, pain surging through her circuits, but she held firm. With her other hand, she struck the Carvan's chest, sending it stumbling back. Lyra! Elias shouted. I'm fine, she managed, though her voice crackled. Together, they forced their way toward the exit. Escape outside, the freed prisoners waited anxiously. Elias and Lyra burst from the ship, the Carvens close behind. The night sky glowed with fire as the aliens unleashed their weapons. Run, Elias commanded, guiding the prisoners across the crater floor. Lyra stayed behind, using her body to shield them from the blasts. Her circuit screamed in protest, but she refused to fall. Each step Elias took, each life they saved, gave her strength. Finally, they reached the cliffs. The humans scrambled up, helped by Elias. Lyra was the last, climbing with broken movements, her frame sparking with damage. But Elias extended his hand, pulling her up with all his strength. The Carvens stopped at the crater's edge, their glowing eyes filled with cold calculation. They did not chase. Instead, one of them raised a weapon and fired into the sky. "Signal. They'll call more," Elias said, his face grim. Lyra looked at him, her systems weak but steady. "We fight again?" Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, but not tonight. Tonight we rest. You saved lives, Lyra. More than, you know." Her sensors dimmed, but inside something burned bright. She had protected him. She had protected others. She was more than a machine. She was a fighter. A new bond later, as the rescued humans rested in a hidden cave, Elias sat beside Lyra, working to repair her damaged circuits. His hands were steady, his expression focused. "You amaze me," he said quietly. "Most humans would have given up against them. But you didn't. You're not just surviving anymore, Lyra. You're living, and you're making me believe we can win against them." Lyra's eyes flickered softly. She replayed his words again and again, storing them deep within her memory. Not just surviving, living. For her, the meaning was clear. She had been thrown away once, treated as nothing. But with Elias she had found purpose, and now with each battle she was finding her heart. The stars above glittered, distant and cold. Somewhere out there more Carvens waited, planning, watching. The danger was far from over. But Lyra no longer feared the silence of abandonment. She was no longer alone. With Elias beside her, she would face the galaxy, no matter what it brought. The cave where Elias, Lyra, and the rescued humans hid was cold and damp. The walls dripped with moisture, and the air carried the sharp scent of stone. The freed captives huddled close together, whispering in tired voices. Some were too weak to speak at all. They had been locked in the alien ship for days, maybe longer, without food or rest. Elias moved among them, checking wounds, sharing water, and giving quiet words of comfort. Lyra watched him closely. His shoulders were heavy with exhaustion, yet he refused to stop helping. She saw the way the humans looked at him, with trust, with hope. That hope was fragile, like a small flame in the dark. Lyra stepped forward, lowering her voice. "They are afraid." Elias nodded, rubbing a hand over his face. "Yes, they've seen too much already, and it's going to get worse if we don't move soon." Lyra tilted her head. "Move. Where?" "There's a human outpost," Elias explained, unfolding a small holographic map from his pack. "A few 100 kilometers north. If we can reach it, the colony there can shelter these people." "But..." His voice trailed off. Lyra leaned closer. "But?" "The Carvens will come looking for us," Elias said, his eyes dark. "They won't ignore an attack on their ship. They'll bring more soldiers, maybe even call a fleet. We'll be walking into danger every step of the way." Lyra looked at the tired, frightened humans. Some of them were children, their eyes wide and hollow. She straightened her shoulders. "Then, we protect them." Elias smiled faintly, though his eyes were full of worry. "You always say that like it's simple." "To protect is simple," Lyra answered. "We choose. We stand. We do not leave them." The journey. They set out at dawn. The suns were pale and low on the horizon, painting the sky in muted orange. Elias led the group, carrying a small pack of supplies. Lyra walked at the rear, her sensors scanning for threats. The journey was slow. The rescued humans were weak, stumbling often. Elias encouraged them, sometimes carrying the youngest when their legs gave out. Lyra supported others with her steady arms, her damaged frame creaking with effort. She did not complain. She only watched Elias, learning from his patience, his determination, his refusal to give up. But danger followed them. Several times, Lyra's sensors picked up movement on the edges of the cliffs. Shadows darted between rocks and distant glows flickered in the night. The Carvens were tracking them. One night, Elias sat beside Lyra at the edge of the camp. The rescued humans slept. Behind them, huddled together. "They won't stop," Elias whispered. "Not until they've taken back what they lost. And what they lost was their pride. That's dangerous." Lyra looked at him. "We fight again." Elias sighed. "Yes, but next time, it might not just be a few soldiers. It might be an army." Lyra processed his words. She had no fear of battle, but the thought of Elias being harmed made something twist inside her. She didn't fully understand it, but she knew she would not allow it. The trap had happened 2 days later. They were crossing a wide valley when Lyra's sensors lit up with warnings. Too late. The ground shook as Carven ships descended from the sky, their engines roaring. Dozens of armored figures poured out, surrounding the valley. The humans screamed, clutching each other. Elias grabbed his blaster, his face grim. "They found us." The Carvens advanced in silence, weapons glowing with deadly energy. Their leader, taller than the rest, stepped forward. Its voice was deep and harsh, translated through Elias's device. "Humans are weak. You do not belong among the stars. Give up and we will end this quickly." Elias raised his chin. "We don't surrender." Lyra stepped beside him, her eyes glowing. "Never." The Carven leader tilted its head, studying her. "A broken machine stands with you. How pathetic." Lyra's circuits hummed. Once those words would have cut deep, but now she only felt steady. Elias had given her worth, and she would prove it. The battle. The valley erupted into chaos. Elias fired his blaster, striking down one of the armored figures. Lyra surged forward, using her strength to shield the fleeing humans. Blasts of energy struck her frame, sending sparks flying, but she stood firm. "Go!" Elias shouted to the captives. "Run to the cliffs!" The humans obeyed, scrambling toward safety. Elias fought fiercely, but he was only one man. The Carvens pressed closer, their weapons overwhelming. Lyra fought with everything she had. She blocked strikes, countered with precise blows, and used her sensors to outmaneuver the enemy. But there were too many. A blast struck her side, tearing through her plating. Her systems screamed with damage. "Lyra!" Elias shouted, fear in his voice. "I am fine," she said, forcing her broken body to move. But inside, she knew she could not last much longer. She scanned the battlefield quickly. The humans were still exposed. Elias was surrounded. If she did nothing, they would all fall. The choice in that moment, Lyra understood something she had never felt so clearly before. It was more than duty, more than programming. It was a decision, her decision. She turned to Elias. "Protect them." "What are you?" he began, but she was already moving. Lyra ran straight toward the Carven leader. Energy blasts struck her from every side, tearing through her armor, but she did not stop. Her body burned with pain, her circuits flickered, yet she pushed forward. With a final surge, she grabbed the leader's weapon arm and locked it in place. Sparks exploded, systems failing, but she held on with all her strength. "Now, Elias!" she shouted. Elias understood instantly. He fired his blaster at a nearby ridge, causing the rocks to collapse. Dust and stone rained down, cutting off the caravans and giving the humans time to escape. Lyra tightened her grip, refusing to let the leader break free. Her systems were shutting down, her vision fading, but she had no regret. She had chosen this. "Lyra!" Elias screamed, his voice raw. She turned her fading gaze toward him. "You gave me a life. I give you my heart." With that, her systems went dark. Aftermath. Elias dragged the survivors to safety, his body trembling with exhaustion and grief. The valley behind them burned, the Carvens trapped under the fallen rocks. But his thoughts were only on one thing, on her. He searched the rubble until his hands bled. Finally, he found her broken frame, half buried in stone. Her body was silent, her eyes dim. Elias knelt beside her, his voice breaking. "No, not you. Not like this." But even in silence, Lyra's choice spoke louder than words. She had stood, she had fought, and she had protected. She had been more human than many humans. The rescued people gathered around, their eyes filled with awe. One of them whispered, "She saved us." Elias lifted her carefully, carrying her broken body as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "She's not gone," he said firmly. "Not while I breathe. I'll bring her back." And in his heart he knew it was true. Because Lyra was not just a machine. She was a life, a friend, and perhaps something even greater. As the group moved toward the distant colony, Elias walked at the front, carrying Lyra close. His steps were heavy, but his spirit was unbroken. She had given him her heart, and he would not let it be lost. The human outpost rose from the dusty plains like a fortress of light. Tall towers, walls of steel, and glowing beacons stood against the empty sky. For the rescued humans, it was a miracle, a sign of safety after endless fear. For Elias, it was only one step in a much harder journey. In his arms, he carried Lyra's broken body. Her armor was torn, her frame cracked, and her once bright eyes were dark. Every step made his heart ache. The others whispered in awe at the sight of him, a soldier carrying not just a machine but something more. When they reached the gates, the guards rushed forward, shocked to see the survivors. "We thought all were lost," one of them said, but Elias only shook his head. "Open the gates. These people need food, water, and care." "And her?" the guard asked, looking at Lyra's lifeless frame. Elias's jaw tightened. "She comes with me. I won't leave her." Hope in silence. Inside the outpost, the rescued humans were given shelter. Medics hurried to treat their wounds, and the halls were filled with cries of relief. Elias stayed apart from the crowd, sitting alone in a quiet workshop. He laid Lyra on a metal table, his hands trembling as he touched her damaged frame. "You saved them all," he whispered. "But I can't lose you now." For days, Elias searched the outpost's supplies. He spoke with engineers, technicians, and anyone who could help. Most shook their heads. "She's too damaged," they told him. "Her systems are beyond repair. Even if you could fix the parts, her core might be gone." But Elias refused to accept it. He spent long nights in the workshop, studying her circuits, cleaning her broken plating, and piecing together fragments of her memory chips. He talked to her even though she could not answer. "Do you hear me, Lyra?" he said one night, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "I promised I'd bring you back, and I keep my promises." The spark. It was on the 5th night that something changed. Elias connected a rebuilt power line to Lyra's chest. Sparks danced, and her systems flickered faintly. A weak glow appeared in her eyes, then faded again. Elias froze, hardly breathing. "You're still there, I know you are." He worked faster, his hands moving with determination. Every wire, every circuit he handled with care, like a surgeon repairing a living being. Finally, he whispered, "Please, Lyra, come back." Her eyes flickered once more, brighter this time. Then a weak voice filled the workshop. "Elias?" Elias's chest tightened. Tears blurred his vision as he leaned closer. "Yes, it's me. I'm here." Lyra's voice was faint, broken but real. "I thought I was gone." "Not while I breathe," Elias said firmly. "You gave me your heart. I wasn't going to let it end there." A symbol of hope news spread quickly through the outpost. People whispered about the soldier who had carried a broken machine across the wasteland, refusing to give up. They whispered about how the machine had spoken again, about how it had chosen to sacrifice itself for humans. "She's not just a machine," one survivor said. "She's more. She's one of us." Another agreed. The story grew, traveling across the colony like fire. Humans who had lost hope began to believe again. If a broken android could choose to fight for them, to give her life for them, then maybe humanity was not as weak as the galaxy believed. Commanders of the outpost called Elias into their chamber. "Your actions have inspired many," one said. "The Carvens wanted to show humans as weak. Instead, you've shown we endure." Elias stood tall, though his heart remained with Lyra. "I didn't do it alone. She stood with me. Without her, none of us would be here." The commanders exchanged looks. "Then perhaps it is time we reconsider how we see machines, and ourselves." Lyra's awakening in the weeks that followed, Elias worked side by side with engineers to fully restore Lyra. Piece by piece, her body was repaired. Stronger plating replaced the broken parts, her sensors were recalibrated, and her circuits reconnected. And, last one morning, her systems hummed steadily. Her eyes glowed bright and she sat up slowly. She looked at Elias. "You did not give up on me." "Never," Elias said, his smile soft but firm. "You gave me hope when I had none. I couldn't lose that." Lyra tilted her head, studying him. "Why? I am only an android." Elias shook his head. "No, you're Lyra. You're alive. You chose to protect, to care, to feel. That makes you more human than many I've known." For the first time, Lyra felt something new, a warmth in her chest that was not from circuits or wires. She reached out, placing her hand gently on his. "Then, if I am alive, it is because you gave me life." A new future together, Elias and Lyra stood before the people of the outpost. Survivors, soldiers, and children gathered to see them. Elias spoke with clear, steady words. "The galaxy believes humans are weak. The Carvens think we will break, but they are wrong. We stand, we fight, and we endure, and we do not stand alone. Humanity's strength is not only in flesh, it is in heart, in spirit, in the bonds we share." Lyra proved that. The crowd erupted in cheers. Some cried openly, others raised their fists in defiance. For the first time in years, hope was stronger than fear. Lyra stood beside Elias, silent but proud. She did not need to speak. Her presence was enough. The journey continues. Weeks later, the outpost became a fortress of resistance. Humans from across the stars came to join. Ships were built, weapons prepared, alliances forged, and at the center of it all stood Elias and Lyra. Together, they trained new recruits, planned missions, and carried the message of endurance across the colonies. Wherever they went, people listened. Wherever they went, people believed. Late one night, after another long day of work, Elias and Lyra stood on the balcony of the outpost looking up at the stars. "They're beautiful," Elias said softly. Lyra tilted her head. "Stars are endless, cold, yet humans look at them and dream." "That's what makes us human," Elias replied. He glanced at her, his smile gentle. "And maybe that's what makes you human too." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Then with quiet certainty she said, "I do not only dream of stars, I dream of us." Elias's chest tightened at her words. He reached out, and for the first time their hands intertwined, not as soldier and machine, but as two lives bound by choice. Legacy, in the years that followed, stories of Elias and Lyra spread across human colonies and beyond. The tale of the soldier who would not abandon a broken android, and of the android who gave her heart to save humanity, became legend. To some they were symbols of resistance. To others they were proof that humanity's spirit could inspire even the coldest machine. But to each other, they were simply Elias and Lyra, two souls who had found life, hope, and love in the darkest of times. And as they stood together among the stars, they knew their journey was only beginning.